one of you said, and maybe if you had one good one who saw you. I mean, one? If you had one good one, what if there were dozens of possibilities? What if there were hundreds of good men and good women, but who could play that part? What would it do to the landscape of younger men and women, boys and girls?
With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Welcome, friends and allies, to a special edition of the Exploring More podcast. Special because special ladies are on this episode, and wonderful wife Robin, then you're known as the Fabulous Sherry.
I am.
So good to have you guys here and get your perspective, which I'm always thankful and appreciative of, sooner or later. Thankful and appreciative of your,
at some point
your 10 cents on and, oh man, I could go off in another direction of, you're a helper. You guys are helpers.
Yes,
we
are. We sure are.
And so we are
You're welcome.
Getting helped today on our Exploring More podcast, particularly in this area of redeeming generational masculinity. I mean, it's really interesting to see how men are responding to that. But I'll ask you now, Sherry, and then we'll take a quick break. When you heard it for the first time, I know there's other questions that we want to get into, significance, importance, but when you heard it for the first time, what happened in your internal systems? It happened in your body, your thoughts. How did it land? What did you feel and think?
Well, I think I loved being part of crafting it, that it wasn't something that was imposed on the women of Zoe.
Yeah.
It was something that we did together, collectively, and it felt freeing and like the most honest naming of who Zoe is and how we move and what we're hopeful for, which is for our men to experience God and healing and transformation, and for that to spill over into our women, for our women, our marriages, and our families to all experience that and be invited into more.
Yeah. And being honest in this moment, it was relieving for me to feel that from you. And when we come back from the break, we'll let Robin kind of tackle that first reaction, first response too. But yeah, we are at such odds today between masculinity and femininity, between men and women. I mean, there's so much in the space of hurt, history, conflict, pain. So to have a banner that the men or Zoe are moving to felt a little risky, but it was such a interesting experience to hear that's how you felt like, wow, this might be good for all of us if we were good at this. So we'll be right back on the Exploring More podcast to look at redeeming generational masculinity from the feminine hearts.
Heart of a Warrior is definitely a place where I feel like men can come as they are, right? So inviting a man to come as they are and to find out that there's more for them, right? That God has more in store for them, and more in store in the sense of things that maybe they haven't yet known or uncovered, I think is why I would invite another man to Heart of a Warrior, to welcome them into a brotherhood where they can feel like they're not alone in a world where we often feel like we're the only ones going through something. So just that simple invite has the opportunity to change the course of another man's story drastically. So that's why I would invite a man to Heart of a Warrior.
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast, talking with my wife, Robin, and my friend, Sherry, about redeeming generational masculinity. And before the break, Sherry got to swing at this question. So your turn. What was just the initial response, reaction, when you just heard that redeeming generational masculinity as a proposal of something that we wanted to move more intentionally at?
Mm-hmm. I was resistant at first because I thought we're so trying to move with women well, and wanting to not leave the women behind, and so I think I was caught off guard when I first heard it, because I wondered, how will this impact women, or what will it be for our women? Will we get left behind?
Yeah.
So that was my first initial kind of, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Why are we going exclusive? It sounds exclusively for masculine hearts.
And I wouldn't, blame any woman for feeling that way, because of there just seems to be a lot that's segmented exclusively, for men and privileging men in a variety of ways. And so, there's systems and history across time and space that, to pursue men as a priority, and you have to finish, right? You have to finish our definition of redeeming generational masculinity. Go ahead.
The hearts of men,
The
women.
healing of.
The
The healing of
hearts,
the
yeah.
hearts.
Yeah.
Right, of men, women, marriages, and families.
Yeah.
And it felt significant even for the men, not just for the women to hear the rest of it,
Yeah.
but for the men to see that this isn't something that they're doing just for themselves
Right.
and just for their
So
the
good.
boys club or being with men, but it is something to pour into
Yeah.
the women in their lives, their children.
Yeah.
And whether it's mothers or sisters and brothers, daughters, all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just for every Wednesday night men's group or
Yeah.
once a year getting away with the guys.
Yeah.
It's for something much larger.
I like what you said earlier when you said it can't help but spill over onto their wives, their daughters, that it will affect the women in their lives as the men move in the restoring, healing of their heart.
Yeah, thanks for saying it that way, because men are already affecting their wives, their daughters, their sons. I mean, there's already an effect. I mean, that's just part of what we're trying to reclaim, and to see the redemptive work of God in the hearts and lives of men feels so weighty and even wildly good that it would spill over for good, that it would spill over for the others in a man's space, or as we talk about in King Me, in his kingdom, those that have been entrusted to him to love. It was never my intention to, kind of see redeeming generational masculinity as a result of King Me, but part of it has been, as we talk about the masculine journey and the different stages of masculinity, I saw the practicality of the kingdom of fathers and sons, older men, younger men. I mean, Paul and Timothy, all the disciples even are. I love how The Chosen shows these guys. They're younger, a little younger than Jesus, historically, theologically, and Peter, it spills over into. It doesn't go well for Peter for a while, but eventually it spills over into Peter's life with his wife and his mother-in-law, and so it's the effect of Jesus on a man that we believe is going to spill over, going to stay with that word, to the lives entrusted to him and in his care. So, yeah, thanks for being in this conversation. So I think we've kind of been swinging around. Anything else to add about the significance? I mean, the weightiness of what if this works? What if this happens? And it's pretty fragile, I think, still. I mean, you guys have both talked to women of, men that have been a part of Zoe, a part of conferences, and there's no guarantee.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. What any thoughts about that and an explanation? Explain that. How does can't we just sign up and take back every hill and it all go well?
Would it be so?
Wouldn't it be? Wouldn't it be nice?
I think about, we had this is a topic for us on Around the Table Zoom with a group of women, inviting them to see what we see and then to hear from them. And so as we shared what we thought about this, how it lands on us, what we're hopeful for in the way of redeeming generational masculinity for the healing of men and women, marriages and families, the variety of responses from the women. And I would say overarchingly, it was yearning to experience this, yearning to experience this kind of healing in their men, that it might come home, that he might come home and influence, have that spill over into their families from women who hadn't experienced it yet. And then incredible stories from women whose husbands had been transformed at these weekends, who have experienced great healing and want to continue that healing journey in them as well as with their wife and with their kids.
Yeah, I remember one. I remember the story. One wasn't so. She was kind of like you, more reluctant. Like, hey, I don't think this is cool. This is concerning. Yeah, and
because we have. May I say something?
Yes, I want you to. Yeah,
we all have stories. Every woman has at least one story of a man in her life that was not safe, who did not care for her, who did not love her well, who did not pursue her with compassion, curiosity, kindness. So we all have those stories. Hopefully, we also have tasted and experienced good men or one good man. And the original good man was intended to be our fathers, our father, our earthly father, our primary caregivers, our mothers and our fathers. And we all have stories of, I would say most of us have stories of both good as well as not so good with our dads. So we all have stories, and so I think that is what fuels some of that kind of that resistance or tentativeness when we talk about generational masculinity.
Yeah.
What were you going to say about that?
Well, I did. As you're talking, I was thinking about, there was a deepening weekend that we held probably 5 or 6 years ago, and we didn't have a work crew. So the men came and they filled that role. So instead of having teenagers there serving meals, we had all men. And we were hoping that would go well. And there were a couple women who were curious about why these men were here. But afterwards, the overwhelming response, and I remember one woman in particular who said, I have never experienced men who just wanted to take care of me and didn't want anything. There was no demand. There was no requirement. It was just pure care and love. And that was such a tender experience for that woman, one woman in particular, but for all the women to experience a man that way.
So, you ready? Like a little bit of softening and tears as you share that. Like, I'd love for you to just share anything more about the emotion that brings to tell that story?
Well, I think that comes up in me because that's what came up in her. I mean, she was sharing that over tears. And for her to experience my husband that way, you that way, the men who were there, that's the longing of my heart. That's my hope, is to redeem men, to redeem us. I mean, we have some redemption going on over here too.
Well,
no doubt.
and
No
it's-
doubt. We have
it's
hurt
not-
the men
right.
in our lives.
It's
But
not exclusive for sure, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so to have that be something that we went in a little bit like, how is this going to go? But for it to be probably the most healing part of the weekend for this one woman, it was just a surprise and delight from God that we couldn't have predicted.
Right. Yeah. Having had the privilege to share and speak on the guide team with the women, for the women, that's been my experience too. I mean, when I get to share on the heart of a man or the warfare that comes against and stand before them and have apologized in a general way, did not expect some of that, some of the response and reaction that even me standing in for masculinity and acknowledging that, to your tears, I say, oh yeah, I've had my tears, and feeling their pain, their gratitude, and their never heard a man apologize. So.
And name some of the things. I remember you naming some of the things.
Very hard things.
Right, right. That on behalf of men.
Yeah, my kind.
named.
I think I say on behalf of my kind.
Yeah.
And so it, and in many ways, the men that have done that damage and have been hurtful, and yes, women have their side of the ledger, and we, but I do think I do think there's a significant and prolific role in this male-female dynamic that is, image bearers equal in significant in every significant way, and then there's roles, and there's opportunities. So to become a man who's disoriented, untrained, unfathered, unfinished, and to be turned loose on a landscape of sexuality, of relationships, of engaging, right, in, I don't even know if we want to call it dating, but we'll call it dating. This is not good for what can happen in teenagers, 20s, 30-something, when, we have a culture that's just unfathered and unfinished of men moving on the landscape with women. So I believe that this generational redemption and what would it be to have, men, and it should be, you're right, you said it earlier, Robin, it should be fathers and mothers who are bestowing, who are handling, the losses, the wounding moments that happen to all of us when we're young. And as we continue to journey, I was thinking about my mom and her passing not too long ago. Just what does a 59-year-old need from his mother and his father at 59? And if you say nothing, man, I would probably respond, tell me about that. Because their words still matter and their presence still matters. So generationally, there's something in the kingdom that's set in motion that way. As you brought up, a mother and a father, and what their role and responsibilities and privileges look like. So if your mother and father have either left the building or left the planet, or had left that role, then who is going to step in? One of you said, and maybe if you had one good one, who saw you. I mean, one? If you had one good one, what if there were dozens of possibilities? What if there were hundreds of good men and good women, but who could play that part? What would it do to the landscape of younger men and women, boys and girls?
I think we are hopeful as women. We are hopeful. I can speak for myself. I'm hopeful for the men in my world, in my family and extended family, as well as for the women who I love and care about and that we work with. For all women to experience redeemed, becoming more and more wholehearted men, becoming more and more deeply restored and wholehearted. However, there is work in the meantime. I get to do my own work.
Yeah.
And consider my story, consider my way of moving in the world, and experience healing for me, whether or not I have good men around me. I don't have to wait for it. That's the ideal. That would be wonderful, but I can experience God's fathering, mothering, care, and healing for my heart. In doing my own work with my sisters and friends like Sherry. We get to do this together, and so there's goodness to be found while, I almost want to say while we wait.
Yes.
But I also want to say I'm encouraged, Michael, by, I think why I could jump to when you originally asked, how did I feel when I first heard about generational masculinity? It was a pretty quick jump when I could realize, okay, the hope, the desire, the longing is for, I see you pursuing your own healing. I see you walking with God in that. I see you honestly facing your story and the impact of your family of origin and things that have happened to you along the way. I see that. So I'm hopeful as I see you move differently with me, with our daughters, with our families, with the team, with people so that brings me hope as I see both of us moving differently. And it's a journey.
It's so good, because one of the things that you're really keying in on is it's not what's accomplished that's so hopeful, it's the struggle. It's watching the intentionality. It's seeing somebody do the work. I mean, it's great to get the picture of before and after, but it's the in between that you are witness to in somebody's overcoming, we say often, overcoming and becoming, that is what inspires. That's what inspires me to do my work when I have friends doing theirs. It's what inspires, I think, us to see somebody's changing, growing, evolving, overcoming things, and getting more free. That's inspiring. It should be inspiring. I think that's the kingdom way. For those who have eyes to see it, you're moving differently. You're acting differently, and to notice that and validate it is inspiring, even in and of itself. Yeah. You have thoughts, Sherry?
Yeah, just as you guys were talking, I was thinking about, watching how Scott's journey with all of this and the work
that's SJ, by the way.
That's SJ. He was Scott for me for many, many years before you redeemed him as SJ. And so just over the past few years, as our son has gone to the Heart of Warrior Encounter, and he's been doing a lot of his own work. It's been beautiful to watch Scott engage with him differently as he comes to us with things he's discovering, things he's awakening to in his story. Wounds, father wounds, mother wounds. We're the mother and father. It's a very different conversation now than it was 4 or 5 years ago when he first embarked on this and first wanted to bring to us what he had experienced. So to see Scott, and to move with Scott this way too, but to see Scott move with tenderness and curiosity and not explaining away, not excusing, not defending, not saying, but you had no idea what we were going through or whatever that might be, but just to meet him there and say, yeah, that's terrible. No wonder you felt this way, this way, this way. And I'm so sorry that I missed you, that I hurt you. My tone, my whatever, to be able to name those things so specifically. Yeah. And to see, I mean, it's tangible fruit, to see tangible change, to see the way the conversation goes very different than it had 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, and I think I want to talk about the Encounter Weekend and an observation that I make when you share that is for SJ, for Scott, who's done a lot of his own work and remembered when people did that to him and it wasn't good, it wasn't helpful, and maybe even wounding. That's where the work that you then experience of how were you hurt, how were you missed, what did they say, what did they do to you, that then ironically some of that stuff just perpetuates into then what you were trained to do.
Right. So he fathers how he was fathered.
So to break those, to enter into that with Jesus and to find the time and space to do good work, because this is the kind of work that's hard to do in the fullness of day to day. You can with counseling and good friends and places that you can share and talk about what you're learning and what Jesus is doing. I mean, that's a very unique space. But to step into a place where that's what's being served for 3.5 days, that's what.
Are you talking about like an intensive?
I'm talking about an encounter weekend, or even an intensive when you're the subject of somebody's care.
Yes, focused attention.
8 to 10 hours in a couple days, those freedom appointments kind of thing. That's what I mean is, so looking, my point was, yes, that SJ has gotten away in those weekends and done work. He's also done other spaces of work. And it's the revelation of what wounded and hurt him that led to the revelation of, I don't want to do that, what was done to me. And when that moment when you see it, that's when we're taking ground on generational masculinity. When the older men, the kings and the elder sages are recovering from things, then they won't hopefully do those things. And most of their work for a while is going to be not only their heart, like you said, but to go home, to take it home. Even if you've been married for 40 years, even if you've been, your kids are 40, you will have a work there because you've had an effect there.
It's never too late.
And so, so speak to redeeming generational masculinity, and I think SJ and I will get to talk about this in another podcast, but just in the Encounter Weekends. Our friends may not know that you handed over a job to SJ. You were the event coordinator for 6 years?
6 years, yeah.
6 years, and now SJ is stepping into that. But you had a very unique seat in coordinating sometimes as many as 400 men to a weekend and interacting with many of, especially first-timers, right?
Yeah.
So you might need to share just a little bit of your perspective on the weekend from the seat that, and I know you're still involved in making sure it all moves well, but so firstly, just what was your perspective? What did you see in that role with men coming into the weekend? And then I want to talk about the weekend as it pertains to generational masculinity, redeeming generational masculinity, and get your thoughts, because you both have been involved in the men's weekends. So,
Whew, where to start? Gosh, I think just over the 6 years, hearing the hunger and thirst of the men as they were coming in, as they were registering, and because the relationships just meant so much to me, helping these men feel seen and heard and known, anticipated, expected, wanting to make it an easy journey from registering to actually arriving at the event.
yeah.
That was my goal. That was my hope. And so inviting them to share, how may we pray for you?
Yeah. How did you find out about us?
Right.
How can we pray for you? Those were the two questions I remember that we, even as Sherry's transitioning it, let's keep these engaging questions because
they're important.
Yeah.
They invite story.
right.
So getting to hear the stories of the men that they would entrust to me, to us, because I would share them with the whole team, and being able to pray for them through that. And even seeing that now in the lens of redeeming generational masculinity, being able to offer that redemption, perhaps just a little bit of a woman who just cares for and mothers and shepherds towards the event. It was a unique seat to sit in for sure, and to be able to see on the other side the men come out the other side just incredibly grateful, not knowing what they were heading for sometimes, but being wildly thankful that they were there, that they stuck with it, that they didn't bail. Because there were some men, there's always some men who are like, I can't make it for this reason. Well, let's not cancel quite yet. Let's just pray about that. Let's see what God does, and to see God come for some of these men and shift some of their circumstances, that they could still be there. It was an incredible,
you did
tender
it so
opportunity.
Well.
I loved doing it.
You did it so well, and really paved a way and set in motion some precedents that, I don't want to get too off track, but what you made me think of was so much of redeeming generational masculinity is redeeming the generational man, the stages of your development. It starts here. So to be a mothering, caring, shepherding. How can we pray for you? And how did you find out about us? Those are just good questions.
And honestly, they were redeeming for me, because I'd had my own season where I was not good for men, where I had been unhealthy for men many, many years ago.
Right.
So even to redeem that for me, in the midst of that.
I wonder how many men, because I feel this sometimes, there's a part of me, we say that, there's a part of me that feels very young. So a question, and it's Sherry, this is a woman, and that then invokes some feeling of probably a younger me who is wanting to offer, well, this is how I'm feeling, and the beauty of being kind of hidden behind the screen and typing it out. But nonetheless, some of those were hugely powerful confessions and
longing and yearning and pain and hurt.
Crawling in, being carried in, and to be cared for from the moment of registration was a really great gift.
This is the last chance. Hearing men say that.
My last hope, Obi-Wan. What about you've sat in a different seat at the men's weekends. You've been on the stage. You've shared. We captured 1 year on video and used that for a few years. But you've interacted with the men differently at the weekends. And how has that weekend? How have you observed that weekend being significant for the hearts of men? In addition to some of the message that you got to share, but just being in that space, one of the few women, right, in that space. Like SJ and I get the privilege of being one of the very few men in that space when the women have the deepening weekend in October 10
through 13.
10 through 13.
Shameless plug.
So, what as we move to the end, what would you say is why is that weekend important, and what have you seen? Because you've been there.
My experience for the years that I did share from the stage with the men is that they have always been, my experience has been, they have been so open and generous is the word I used year after year. And open, generous, and kind and grateful. Just the line of men that would come up to me afterwards, after hearing me share, and just wanting to thank me and tell me some of their story and what they're hopeful for to bring back to the women in their lives, in their life, was just encouraged my heart.
Yeah.
That they were tender and open and longing for more and longing to do this well. That encouraged my heart greatly. Like it's worth
I
it.
remember
It's
Hopeful.
you did such a good job of both representing women, hurting women. I mean, I remember you sharing paragraphs from contributions from
Right.
women
Some stories
wounded
of women
by their fathers, by stepfathers, so sharing that
husbands or
and doing it kindly in a way that you would, as you went down that path into the dark and came through, then the invitation to men by a woman, we need you to enter this, get on this healing path. We need you to move in this way, to where they probably were disrupted a good bit, but also got the chance to be kindly confronted and then invited. I think that when I think of redeeming generational masculinity and the role that women could play, I get it. I don't, there's a hesitation and then there's a hope. And I think that's fair. It's earned. The hesitation for sure is earned, and yet the hope of redeeming, redemptive marriage, redemptive family, redemptive relationships between men and women. We've got a ways to go, but I think this could be significant at moving in the right direction with the help of God. Any other thoughts?
Well,
Final thoughts?
Yeah, I loved what you said in King Me on page 238. And just what you're telling men, that it's time men join Jesus in honoring, loving, protecting, and promoting women. God created two image bearers, male and female. An image bearer 2.0 taken from the side of 1.0 was not created inferior. She was entrusted to our care, not because she is less, for she is not less, but because she is precious. And I love those two words together, that we are entrusted into the care of men because we are precious. Yeah. And if men can know that and move, knowing that changes so much.
Yeah. Go back to the beginning, and Jesus was really cool that way. Yeah. I think, again, The Chosen has given us some really impactful images of Jesus moving with women.
Yes.
So for the men and women listening, there's a couple chapters. There's a chapter 15 in King Me. There's a chapter 13 in Heart of a Warrior. I mean, those were chapters and there's a reason why they're in the teens and not, there's chapters before that to really help a man. Now we can talk about this. The healing path, the beloved son, the knowing that you're in a love story that's in the midst of a great battle. I mean, just orientation that now we can talk about, what it is to honor a woman, love a woman, care, and be a provision of strength and kindness rather than some kind of consumption. And so, this this ability to kind of have your endorsement, the ability to have your encouragement while still on the battlefield in many ways, fighting for the hearts of women as well. It just means a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It means a lot to me, to our team, and to the men that are hopeful like you are, that what if this works a little?
Yeah, and what if our son is getting married? What if he raises his kids differently?
Mm-hmm.
What if he lives and moves and heals and all of this with his wife and kids that they'll someday have differently?
Mm-hmm.
I will be grateful.
That would be good.
And I think of the word you just used, endorsement. And I think what came to me in that moment was, I know this has been a significant year for Sherry and for me, with you, being married to you, and to Sherry being married to SJ. And we have seen you both move in new ways. We've been in this healing message for a long time.
Yeah.
But there are deeper levels of healing.
Yes.
It is ongoing.
Yeah.
It is not accomplished in a weekend. And you and Scott have done more work this year than I have seen combined in past years, and it's been significant. And I have felt it, and our daughters have felt it. And so I can stand behind this with hope, because of that. I want you to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Very, very
Yeah.
kind. So, friends, thank you for joining us for this special edition of Redeeming Generational Masculinity with the...
It's a mouthful.
For the healing
with the healing, for the healing of the hearts of men, women, marriages, and families from feminine hearts who care, who are, I know in your cases, not just cheering us on, but are literally beside us in this fight. And so thank you so much.
So we have a comment of the week.
The comment of the week.
From our dear friend Terry Cardona out in California. And she says, God, please multiply the impact and resources for this ministry in Jesus' name.
That feels very encouraging. Yeah, Terry and
Donnie.
Yeah, the crew out in the Southern California area that are using the Rendezvous Project to, it's just a fun story to find that, wait a minute, you have how many men and women in the Rendezvous Project? Like dozens, almost now in the hundreds. So they've been, they were allies before we knew them, and now it's been really fun to connect with Terry and Donnie. So if you have a comment or a thought, go here to the website below, as Kayla will make that available. And write us a comment or review. That's always helpful. Share us to your friends, and hope that they'll find this helpful. And remember that with God there is always more. So keep exploring.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.